What's up everyone? Today we're going to look at how to create components in Figma from beginner level all the way to expert level. And then we're going to look at how we can share them and actually use these components in different files. As usual, you've got your exercise file in the description below, so feel free to follow along. Let's jump in. Before beginner level, we're going to look at a really simple component, and that's going to be like this little card for an e-com website. Now, what even is a component? A component is just a reusable asset. So you make it once and then you can reuse it multiple times. And if anything changes in that main component, it will trickle down to all of its instances. So let's say in my design, I'm going to use this card a lot. So what I can do is I just select it, go up here in the top toolbar and click on the Create Component button. So you'll see in the layers panel that it turns purple. Anything that has to do with the components, an instance, a variant, anything that's kind of like within the component family is going to be purple in the layers panel. And it's also going to have a purple bounding box inside of our canvas. So now that this is a component, nothing really changed for us. The only thing is, but when I go into my assets panel, you'll see that inside beginner, because this is in the beginner section, I have this card, and that means that this is a reusable asset. So now let's say I want to use it. I'm just gonna click on F and drag to create a frame over here. I'll grab my asset, my card, and just put it in there. And you will see that in my layers panel, it is purple. It has an empty diamond, which means it's an instance. In the design panel, it's going to tell me what is it an instance of. So right here, it says it's an instance of card. And if I click on this button, go to main component, it will take me to that main component. Now I'm just going to duplicate this a few more times, Command D, Command D, Command D. So I have a few more of these cards, and you can see that they're all the same as their main component. And what's super cool about components is that if something changes in the main component, for example, let's say I decide that this actually needs to be on this side, can you see how all the instances change as well? So that is kind of the one source of truth, and everyone has to follow that. Now over here, if I want to change stuff, I can. So this one can be 300, this one could be 20, this one could be 40. Let's say I want to change this so it's not an image, it's actually just a color. I want it to be blue. Yeah, so I can change things in the instances and it does not affect the main component. The one thing you can't do inside of an instance is delete anything. So for example, if I go over here and I select this kind of favorite button, if I click backspace or delete, it will disappear. But if you look in the layers panel, I can see that it's just hidden. It's not actually removed because I can't do anything that will really change the depth of the component. If, for example, I've done all these changes, but I'm really not happy with them, I just want to go back to how the component originally was, I can right click and say reset all changes, and it will just change everything back to how it used to be. If I do want to make a really drastic change and I want to change this card completely, I want to move things around, for example, I want to move this up. You see, I can't change the location of anything inside of an instance as well. What I can do is right click and detach instance. You'll see that it lost its purple color. The bounding box isn't purple anymore either. And then I can do whatever I want. I can move things around. I can delete things. So if I do want to make any changes, I have to detach the instance. So that was our beginner level. Super, super easy. Now let's take it one step further. Over here in our intermediate level, I've got a little progress bar. Now with progress bars, firstly, they'll have different types of progresses, right? Let's say in my design, I only need these kinds of spreads. I need a 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100. But I also want them to sometimes have some text on them, sometimes they don't. So you could say that these are 10 different kinds of components, but Figma says to us, these aren't 10 different components. They're one component with 10 different variations. I'll go to this dropdown and create a component set. Now, when I create a component set, you'll get this purple line around them, and we are saying this is one component with 10 different variations. Right now, I haven't told Figma what are the differences between them, so you'll have a little warning here, but we'll fix that. So when you have a component set, we're going to need to tell Figma what is the property that differentiates between all of these variants, and then what are the different values. And you can have as many properties as you like. So for example, one property that we know here is how much it's filled, right? So I'm already going to have one kind of default property here. So I'll just change the name of it by double clicking on it. And I'll write in fill. Then I'll select each one or a few of them at a time and change the value. So I'll select both of these. I'm just holding down shift while I do that. And instead of default, which is the value, I'm going to say their fill is 0. Select both of these, their fill is 25. Select both of these, their fill is 50. Select both of these, their fill is 75. Select both of these, their fill is 100. Now, when I select my progress bar, you'll see that it's still giving me the warning because it has two things that are each of these, right? Two of them are 25, two of them are 50. So it's saying, how can I know which is which? So I'm gonna add another variant. Clicking on the plus next to properties, add a variant, and this one is going to be if there is a label or there isn't. So I'm just gonna call it label. I'll leave the value as default for now. Then I'll select all of these. I'm holding down Command while I drag my mouse. And the value for this is going to be false, right? Because there isn't a label. And then I'll select all of these, holding down Command, and the value is true. So now when I select my component set, you'll see that there's no more warning, Figma's happy. One thing that I'm not happy about is you see that 100 comes before the 0. So if I click on this edit property, I can change this around. So I'm just gonna drag 100 to the bottom here. Yeah, great. Now, if I pull out this progress bar, go into my assets panel, you'll see straight away something's different, right? And this is quite new. There's a little like preview of what the instances really are in the assets panel. So you see it says 10. If I select it, just click on it, I can already see what the different kind of variants are over here. But let's just drag it in. Once we drag it in, you can see that it's telling me that it is an instance of progress, and I can see that in the layers panel as well because it's an empty diamond. But now I have these drop downs over here. So fill, I can select, is it 0? Is it 50? Is it 100? Is it 25? And then I also have a toggle for the label. Now, the reason we have a toggle here and not a dropdown is because we use true and false. It would work the same if we use on and off as well. If you have kind of that true or falsy sort of thing, using true and false just gives you a toggle instead of a dropdown, which is really fun. So I can just toggle the label on and off, select 100, select 25, select 0, and that kind of label will stay there with me. So variants are super powerful and you can have loads and loads of different variants to help you out. Let's move on to our next level to see how we use component properties to make this even more efficient. Now for our intermediate level, we're going to look at a button. Now I do apologize for the lack of creativity with Figma YouTubers about components. I literally searched for a single video about components that does not use a button example and I couldn't find one. But buttons are just such a good example of how components can be insanely useful in Figma and for your design system because you just need buttons everywhere. So I've got this button over here. It has a label and it has an icon in it. Now you'll notice in the layers panel that this icon is an instance of a component. This component is called banana. If I click on this, go to main component, I'll see that over here, I've got a little frame called food icons. Inside of it, I have 9 components for different kind of food icons, and each one of them is a component of its own. It's not a component set. So I just dragged a banana into here. This is an auto layout, so they're nicely next to each other. So inside of this button, I have an instance of the component banana. I'm going to turn this button into a component of its own. Now, even once I do that, nesting components already is a really powerful tool. So if I just drag out this button straight away, I'll go into advanced button. You will see that in here, I know that it's button, but if I double click and select banana, over here, I can use the drop down to just change it to a different instance. So I can use carrot. I can even, and this is really weird, but I can swap it to like a card. It won't really work well. You won't really see it. I can change it to a progress bar. I can change it to a different component that I have in my library. I'm gonna bring it back to banana just because that's kind of what we're intending to do. Let's say I don't wanna always see this icon. I wanna have a version of this button where the icon is hidden. Okay, so I could do what I did before and create a new variant, right? I could go in here, say variant, and then just duplicate this button, remove the icon, add in that true or false. But we have a way of doing this using component properties. So if I select my banana over here, you'll see that in the design panel, I now have this type of icon in certain places that is the component property button. So next to the layers section, I've got this one and it's create Boolean property. If I select it, I'll just leave it with the default name, create property. Now when I go into my instance, I'll just write instance here to remind us that this is the instance of the component. When I select it, you'll see that I have a toggle to show or hide the banana. Exactly like I had before when I had the variant and I used true or false, but here it's just, I didn't need to create that second one. I just used a Boolean component property, yeah? And I can do the same, for example, with the text. So if I select this text, component property button next to layer, create property, show label, fun. So now in here, I've got one to show the label, one to show the banana, and even both of them can be toggled off, right? It could just be empty. Probably wouldn't want that though. It is resizing automatically because it's in an auto layout. I've got a few videos of auto layouts that I'll link up here below, so you feel free to check those out. So that's one kind of component property, and that's Boolean. We've got two more. So the next one is text, and it's actually one of my favorites. So if I select anything that is a text box, like this label, over here where I would usually just choose the font and all of that, I've got this extra little space where I can type into and also have a component properties button. And if I select it, I can create a text property. I'll select that and I'll call it label, and I'll just create it. Now, when I go into my button, I'll have a space here and I can just type directly in my design panel. So I can say hello, and it will just change, yeah? Now this is a pretty simple component, so I could just double click in and change the text over here. But imagine if it was super, super, super complex and you have to double click in or have to hold down command and find it. Also, one really, really cool trick with the text component property is you can change multiple instances at the same time. So I'll just duplicate this button a few times, just Command D. Now I'll select all of them and go in here and type in something else, and you'll see that they all change at the same time. I know I've had situations before where this has been really, really life-saving, where I had to like change something on the fly in many, many different places. So that is the text property. Now the last kind of component property is instance swap. So remember, we do have a nested instance inside of this component, right? We have that banana, and when we wanted to change it, we had to double click to find it or find it from the layers panel. So what instance swap component property does is it allows us to do that from the top level of the component without having to click in, similar to the text one. So I will select my instance over here, my banana instance, and then next to where I could just swap to something else, or I can go to main component, I've got this button. I'll click on it and I'll create my component property. Now, with the instance swap, I'm just gonna remove preferred values for now, and I'll explain this in a second. So I'm just gonna call it icon, and I'll create the property. Now, when I click on my button, I will have that drop down over here. So I can change it to carrot, change it to beer, I can change it to whatever I want. So instead of having to click in, it's already there. Now, what's really cool about these component properties is that they're also kind of tied to each other. So for example, I have a space here where I can change the text in label, right? But if I hide label, that component property will disappear, because saying you can't change the text if you're not showing the text, right? And same thing for the icon. If I decide to hide the icon, I know it's called banana, not icon, but if I hide it, that instance swap property will also disappear. Now with the instance swap property, I just want to show you that you have something called prefer values. I'm going to edit this. You'll see over here that I've got some preferred values that I can set, and that just means that I'm going to narrow down which instances the user is allowed to use. Do you remember before when we were playing around with it and I just swapped it to, let's say, the progress bar or the card? I don't want people to be able to do that. So I can say it's just, I'm just gonna narrow it down really, it's just banana, avocado, beer, and bread. That's it. You can't use anything else. So because I set those, now when I look at this drop down, those are the only 4 that I will see. Now, I can override this. You see over here it says preferred. I can go here to local components and choose whichever I want. But these are the preferred ones. So these are kind of the easy access ones that I can choose. I know it's a banana, I know it's the avocado, and all of those. So that's a great way to just narrow down the selection for whoever's using your design system. Or for yourself. Make yourself's life easier. Now in our expert level, I'm gonna really challenge you. This is a super complex component. It's gonna combine everything we looked at so far, plus show you how you can utilize those nested components even further. So if you are maybe familiar with the iOS design system, table cells are a big deal. Yeah, they're everywhere. And they're really complex. Basically, this is a table cell and it's got loads of different variations to it. But if I tried to create this in variants, I would just lose my mind because there's too many possible combinations. So what I've done is I have this frame that has all of the kind of components and options of what could go on the left side of the text. Over here, I've got everything that can go on the right side of the text. And then inside of here, you've got a kind of 2 more text boxes for potential subtitles, yeah? So this is the kind of maximum state of this table cell. And now I'm gonna show you how I use component properties and nested instances to really make this the most versatile component you've ever seen in your life. So everything here on the right side are different components. So you can see in the layers panel as well, you've got disclosure, icon plus disclosure, 2 icons plus disclosure, details plus disclosure. And a lot of these have component properties or variants of their own. For example, if we look at this one, you will see that it has a text component property. So if I use an instance of this, I'm just gonna copy it holding down Option and Shift. So this is an instance of this component. You'll see that I can change the text. This one, for example, is a component set with different variants. So it's got unselected, checkmark, subtract, and add. This one is a switch with a true and false. This one has a component property which hides these two, and this one's actually cool. I just want to take a second to explain this one. So I'm just going to use an instance of it. You have a component property to change the number inside of it, for example. But what if I don't want the number? So what I did over here is I added a Boolean component property that hides the number, but it doesn't just hide the number. You can bind multiple things to the same component property. If I look at the component itself, this text box is connected to a Boolean component property called number, but this little line is also connected to the same one, right? And all that means is that now if I just make an instance of this, so this is an instance of this component, when I hide number, both of those hide, yeah? So if I open this up, you see that both the number and the separator are both hidden. And if I toggle it on, both of them will be visible. So you can bind multiple things to the same Boolean component property. So what I did was I have an instance over here of, let's click go to main component to see what it's an instance of, this guy. And then over here, I've got an instance of this guy, yeah? Now is where the real work begins. I'm gonna select this table cell and create a component. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is something we've done before, right? I'll select this icon. I'm gonna create an instance swap property, and I'll just put this and say left. Now I don't want any preferred values. I'm kind of happy with it as it is. Just create that. Then I also want a Boolean property for the same one. So into the layer section, create a Boolean. I'll just say show the left arrow again. Now I'll go into the center. For the title, I just want a text component property. So I'll go in here and I'll say title. Now what I like to do is if you're on a Mac, I'll use Control, Option, and Space to open my emojis. I really like adding this little pencil whenever it's a text property. I'll just copy that so I can paste it later. Now, subtitle, I want to be able to hide the subtitle and also change the text. So I'll start by adding a Boolean component property over here, and I'll call it subtitle. Then I'll add a text component property, paste in my pencil, subtitle. And again, for the subtitle 2, I'll go into layer, create property, subtitle 2, text component property, paste my pencil, subtitle 2, lovely. And then for my right kind of side accessory, I'll select the instance and then create an instance swap. And I'll just call it, it's the arrow first actually. Right, again, remove the preferred values because I'm happy with it being kind of anything. And also I'll have a layer property. I might change this name after. Great, one more thing. I do have a little separator just down below. So I'll select it. It's way, way, way at the bottom of my layers panel. Just add a Boolean component property to that as well. Great. So when I select my component now, you already see there's so much going on. Now I would really, really recommend that you have some sort of system when you create your component properties. I really like to use little emojis and arrows because they help me see things a lot quicker. Plus this space on the design panel is not large, so it will just truncate the text if it's too long of a label. So I might actually just play around with this a bit more. Instead of show, so Control, Option, and Spacebar, I'm actually gonna use this little eyes, yeah. And then I always like to have the toggle above the actual selection. So that's good for here. I'm also gonna use eyes, this one eyes. And you can see what type of component property it is by the little iconography next to it. Then this one needs to come first. Okay. And separator, I actually want to be separator all the way at the top. I'm gonna create an instance of this. I'll go into my assets panel, then toggle expert and just drag out this table cell. So now we have an instance of it and you see all of these in action. So I wanna remove the subtitle. I wanna change, let's say, the left icon. So in here, I'll go into icon and then I'll change it. Now, so over here, you see it's a bit of a mess. I've got loads of things going on, but this is only because it's actually inside of a section. So let me show you something. If I just remove everything from the section, I'll right click my section and just ungroup. Now, when I go into my instance swap drop down, I actually only have these three. And the reason for that is these are in their own frame. These are in their own frame. So they're only going to draw from their nearest kind of parent. So over here, if I go to this drop down, I can only see X left. And over here, I will only see X right to start off with. Because it was in the selection, it kind of gave me everything that's in the selection. But I kind of prefer it this way because it is almost like having the preferred values without having the preferred values. Now we can see that I can change this to the image. I can change this to the selection. I can remove it. Over here on the right, let's say I want to change it to icons plus disclosure. I want to change it to date and time. Yeah, I can change it to whatever I want. But let's say I change it to this kind of selection. We know that selection has 4 different variants, right? So if I double tap in, I will be able to change it to subtract, to check mark. But I need to double click in to do that. And this is where a really expert move comes in. If I go to my main component and in properties, I have the option to expose properties from nested instances. So now I don't know if you're ready for this, but once I turn this on, click on nested instances and then select, it shows me, I can see that you have this nested instance and also this nested instance. You can see when I hover over them, it kind of highlights them in the main component. So once I expose those, now when I select my instance, it's gonna, you see, suddenly I have the ability to change the checkmark from here and it's telling me which one it is, right? So if I change this, let's say to disclosure, that one doesn't have really any nested instances. But if I change it to details plus disclosure, there's a text, there's that. Let's see the others. So selection, we've already seen. What about date and time? Date and time has a few different nested component properties and variants. So I can toggle off the date and time. I can change the date and time over here. I can remove the time picker. And it's the same on the left side as well. So if I toggle on the left side, I can change it to icon and then I can have it with the background or without the background. I'll change it to the selection, just like the other one. I can change it to an image and then there's a small image or a large image. Yeah, so it's just kind of, you can see how using all of these things together, you could just create the most dynamic components. You can have all of these options on the right. And with the separator, just a simple one, you know, do I have a separator? Do I not have it? Easy peasy. So now that we looked at all the different levels of components, let's look at how we can actually use these components, right? So these are the components that we created during our short time together. And we already know that in this file that we are in that's called Components Basic to Master, we can use them, right? I can just duplicate them and create instances of them. I can go into my assets panel and drag them out. Now I can also copy them from here and paste them into another file. So for example, if I open a new file completely over here, and then I'll just create an instance of card over here. So I'll go into my assets panel, drag out a card. If I copy this instance, not the component itself, just copy the instance and then paste it into another file. Yeah, it's still an instance of card. And you'll see over here, it's telling me I can go to that main component in a different file. So if I click on that, it will still bring me here. But that's pretty clunky and it's not how we really want to use components. I have seen, you know, in big companies or big brands where they create sort of a sticker sheet of their design library. So it's just all the instances that you can use and then you can copy and paste them into your designs. I would not really recommend doing that because yeah, they won't necessarily update correctly. So I wouldn't really recommend it. So let me show you what kind of my best practice is. In order for us to be able to use this properly in different files, we need to publish this file. So in my assets panel, you have this little kind of book that says libraries, and you see over here I can publish. And if I click on publish, I can select which ones I want to publish. I don't have to publish all of them. Fine for now, so I'm just gonna publish it. Once it's published, it might take a second if it's a bigger file. Then I can go into a different file, go into these libraries over here, and then turn on this file. So this one's called Component Basics to Master. I can add it to my file, and now you will see all of these in the asset panel. So I can drag them in, I can use them, I can use all of the variants, I can do whatever I want with them. And then if I want to go to the main component, I have the button here and it can still take me there. One really useful thing about using libraries is that if something changes in the main component, so let's say I want to change over here, I don't want the inside of the progress bar to be blue anymore, I want it to be green, for example, or red. Yeah, let's use red. So you see now there's that little dot over here and it's telling me that something's different. I've updated something. So I can go into my libraries and then publish. It's showing me that there's one change. This has been modified. I'll publish it. And then once that's published, when I go into this file, oh, see that came up straight away. It's telling me there is an update, something changed. I can review it, and then even if you click on it, you can see kind of what is the change. You can use an overlay side by side to tell you the differences. And then I'll just update this instance, or I'll update all of the changes, and you'll see that that updated straight away. Yeah, so it kind of helps you to maintain that single source of truth somewhere and then trickle it down throughout any way you use it. And that is it. In a really short amount of time, we created some really complex components together and then saw how we can actually use them in our design files. I really hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. Let me know how you're getting on, what other videos you want to see. See you at the next one.